Coming to you live from the Interaction Media Studio in Morgantown. Welcome to Positively West Virginia. I'm your host, Jim Matuga. Today, we're going to visit with Liz Riffle. She's the owner of Riffle Farms, American Bison in Terra Alta, West Virginia. Of course, that's in Preston County. But first, a little bit about our mission here at Positively West Virginia. Every week, we talk with West Virginia business leaders and share their business success stories with people just like you in West Virginia and across the country. When we first started this podcast project back in 2017, one of the things we set out to do was to encourage and inspire our listeners with positive business stories from right here in the Mountain State. To date, we've produced more than 200 episodes, and Positively West Virginia is now a 501c3 nonprofit organization. You can learn more about our mission of promoting small business and entrepreneurship in West Virginia at positivelywv.com. You know, I get to see so many positive things happening in West Virginia business every day that a lot of people, quite frankly, never get to hear about. So my team at Interaction Media and Positively West Virginia, we're working to change that with this show, with this podcast, with this movement, so that people realize you don't have to leave West Virginia to find great business opportunities. They're right here in our state. We want to encourage people to stay here or maybe move here and build a great company, build a great business or an organization right here in West Virginia. All of our guests are people who are actually getting that done day in and day out too. They're not just talking about it. And I'm convinced we can all learn from their experiences, most importantly, their stories. Once again, our guest today is Liz Riffle. She's the owner of Riffle Farms, American Bison in Terra Alta, West Virginia. Liz, thank you for being on the show today.
Jim, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to learning more about your company. I'm excited to have you on the podcast. As I mentioned, Liz Riffle is the owner of Riffle Farms, American Bison, the first commercial bison operation in the state of West Virginia. A registered nurse by trade, Liz has gone from the bedside to the barn side. But health is always at the forefront of her mind, which is why she chose to raise a heart-healthy, super lean bison. Liz is also a U.S. Navy Nurse Corp veteran. Nurse Corp veteran. Liz, thank you for your service. Before I go any further, I really appreciate that, as our audience does too. She's a mom to 19-month-old Jamin and the proud wife of active duty U.S. Navy Nurse Corps Lieutenant Commander Jimmy Riffle from Grafton, West Virginia, I just learned. In addition, Riffle Farms was the first farm business to field harvest animals for state certified commercial sale, which is now her second business, The Honest Carnivore, a West Virginia meat collective. That's we're going to talk a little bit about that, I hope, too, and we can learn about that effort that Liz is undertaking as well. We invited Liz to be on the show today to talk about Riffle Farms, American Bison, to share their story and to give our audience some valuable insight into the company she leads right here in West Virginia. Liz, take a minute, fill in some gaps from that very brief intro I just gave, and give us a little behind the curtain look into your company.
Yeah, sure thing, Jim. So we started raising bison out here in Terra Alta in the summer of 2017. We brought our first 8 head of animals out there to kind of see what we could do from there. But basically the idea started because Jimmy is born and raised in Grafton, and he really wanted to come back to West Virginia to raise a family.
Awesome.
And my background historically is actually in horses. So I grew up with horses. I did a lot of horse training. Even throughout the years, when I was in the military, I took lessons and trained off the track thoroughbreds and did some work in different communities, actually around the nation, rehabbing some horses. So my big thing was, okay, sure, let's go back to West Virginia and let's have a farm, because I'd really love to have some horses.
Yeah.
So he's like, well, if we're going to fence in, if we're going to put fencing up for horses, why don't we raise something that makes a little bit of money? So that would be nice to do in retirement. So he's got a couple years left until he retires from the Navy. And this is basically our retirement plan. I still don't have horses. So those are coming though, I think. I still mention it here and there every once in a while. But we now have a healthy herd of about 38 animals now.
38.
So we had a nice healthy calf crop of 8 animals this year. Yeah. So we have here in so, and we're all grass fed all the time, grass fed and grass finished. We don't grain feed our animals to fatten them up or anything like that. Just because also the bison is a different animal. So even if you did feed them grain, they don't fatten up like a cow does. That steak is not going to marble and get, you know, a nice fatty layer in it the way some people like. So it's not worth, you know, really the effort to grain feed them. And we really want the animals to do what they do best on the ground and with the soil and with the grass. So yeah, so we're just out here learning a lot from them and just kind of along for the ride. It's been a wild one, let me tell you.
So Liz, talk a little bit about
But yeah, so you tell me how much more.
Talk a little bit about, you know, how you got the bison here to West Virginia, being the first bison farm. How did that go down? Was there a permitting process? Did you just throw them in a truck and haul them over here? I'm curious about how you got started.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a process. So, I mean, the state was aware that, you know, we were going to be transferring, quite honest with you, just because where we were getting them from, and just regionally as well, there aren't a lot of, you know, infectious diseases that the bison would carry. They're tuberculosis free. You know, West Virginia is a tuberculosis free state, and we got our first animals from Ohio, which is also a tuberculosis free state. So there really wasn't a whole lot of permitting, honestly, that needed to happen to do that, which was kind of nice.
Yeah.
So we were able to go up to a gentleman up in Ohio and purchase animals from him. And it's a farm that I had visited many years back, just when I was doing a lot of the research into the industry. So I've been researching the industry since about 2014 and talking to a lot of ranchers, a lot of them out west. Obviously, that's where a lot of people think, you know, the majority of the buffalo roam, which they're true in thinking that, but there's quite a few producers in the east as well. So we did lots of different farm visits, and the gentleman up in Ohio was just super helpful. And he had a lot of animals that were also grass fed and grass finished. And so we felt comfortable purchasing animals from him first. And we did. We went down there with just a livestock trailer, your typical cattle trailer. We bought a bunch of 2-year-old animals. So they were young, they're smaller, you know, they were definitely, you know, only about like maybe 500 pounds a piece, a little bit more manageable, still very nervous around you. So, you know, we didn't have any animals that were acting all bullish or anything like that. So that was a little bit easier, but we loaded up a trailer with 8 animals. And gosh, I'll never forget though, on our way up there, I was so excited, and we're ready. We've got this truck, we got this big trailer, we're making this huge trek, and the trailer gets a flat tire.
Oh no.
So we have to fix that and wait for somebody to help us out with that. And then we had truck engine problems on the way up there too. And so we didn't get up to that Ohio bison farm until 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and we left at like 6 a.m. Which means that yes, exactly, right? It was like baptism by fire, exactly as what it was. So we didn't get the animals back to our farm until midnight that night. We unloaded the trailer. So it was like, all right, welcome. You have now arrived to being a farmer.
Yeah. That's awesome. So
yeah.
I always like to ask people, you know, about this point in the show to give us your 30-second pitch for Riffle Farms American Bison. In other words, what is it that you say, that you tell people that you do?
Yeah, definitely. So bison is also the same thing as buffalo. So a lot of people are confused by the two of them. Buffalo is just the nickname for bison. But the reason why we chose to raise bison is because it's a heart healthy meat and it's super lean. So it actually has less fat in it than chicken, more protein in it than salmon, and more omega-3 fatty acids than even grass-fed beef. And that's why we have these animals, because I love a good steak and I don't feel bad eating bison steak almost every day of the week.
That's awesome. I love it. You've got that down for sure. And just a couple of years in business, you got it down. So So tell us a little bit about, what is it that you sell? Do you, in other words, somebody come and buy like a quarter of a bison, or do you buy it by the pound? Talk a little bit about how people buy your product.
Yeah, sure thing. So we do all kinds of things. You can definitely come by and buy a steak.
Liz, you froze up on me. I don't know if you could hear me, but you froze up.
But you can most definitely buy a quarter bison if you want to pose in. And how's that? Is that any better?
Yes, now it is. Yeah. But you froze
Okay.
up right as you were getting ready to, and we can edit this, don't worry. But
Okay.
you mentioned, I said, how do people buy your product? If you could maybe take
Yeah.
it from there, that's when you froze up. I'm so sorry.
Sure, that's okay. So they can buy our product in many different ways. So we do steaks. You can buy individual steaks, but you can also buy a quarter bison if you want to do that. So we try and really give folks all kinds of options to get that meat into their freezers.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about, you mentioned the benefits of bison in terms of low fat, protein content. How does it taste? I've never had bison that I know.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Obviously, I'm a little partial, but so instead of that fatty taste that beef has, it has a sweet finish to it, almost like a hazelnutty flavor. So it's good, clean, red meat. It's still, got some juice to it, but it's got a sweet finish instead of like that fatty, like, I guess I would say beef is kind of like that fatty, almost buttery taste.
Yeah, that's awesome. So people buy it from your website, or can they buy it at local stores, farmers market? Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So we've been playing around with a few different options here over the past few years. At first, we were just doing it at farmers markets, and we're actually at the Morgantown Farmers Market every Saturday. So you can definitely get meat from us there, or you can pre-order and we'll bring something specific to you. Especially if you want like a large order, or if you want to pick up your quarter bison there, we can definitely do that. So we do have an online presence now. Ever since actually COVID last year, it kind of required us to have more of an online presence so that folks could pre-order, and then we could drop meat at certain places. So we still do use the online store, and you can definitely see what we have in stock and what types of cuts that we have. But we still require you to either come up to the farm to grab that meat, or meet us at a farmer's market to grab that meat, because I don't ship it. So I'm a little bit too small of a operation to make that cost effective for us. So we don't ship, but you can come get it. So
yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your farm, never have been there. Talk a little bit about how many acres is it? What do you guys do up there? You have tours and that kind of thing, or?
Yeah, we do. We do all kinds of different events now. So we're really starting to get into like the agritourism piece of the business. So, I mean, most people haven't seen a bison before. And so we recognize that, and they're like, oh my gosh, can I bring the kids? Or like, my husband would love to see that. So we try and bring folks up, and like, yeah, heck, come on up here. Come see these animals. They're really, really cool. We have 64 acres of rolling hills up there in Preston County. We're kind of at the top of our own mountain, actually. So the elevation where we are is just over 2,200 feet, which is super nice because we were talking about the winters earlier. It gets nice and cool, and there's usually a nice breeze blowing, except for 1 month out of the year, which is this month. Otherwise, it's really nice and cool. The grasses are plentiful, and the springs, just flow all year round, which is really, really great. And the bison really appreciate that. So they don't really want to be hot. So they really love that cooler weather and the nice cool winters too. So, but we have folks come out here and watch these buffalo roaming in the hills of West Virginia. So we just rotate them from grass pasture to grass pasture. And when we do events, we do like a full farm tour, and you can see the handling system that we do use for these animals too. We do have to do health checks on them, and we do that about twice a year. And bison are only semi-domesticated. So when it comes to putting our hands on them, it's a little rowdy.
Oh, I bet. So I have a question because I don't
Yeah.
know if this is folklore or if this is truth, but I've heard that in a storm, the bison will actually face the storm and run into the storm. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah. Head on.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it
I've
is.
always
It's
wondered
awesome.
about that, because I've heard that said, but I didn't know if it was true or not. That's super cool. So,
Yeah. Out there in the winter, they're just all sitting there with it snowing right in their faces. Not a problem.
I bet that's awesome. That would make a good
Yeah.
photograph. What would you say is the thing you're most excited about for Riffle Farms American Bison right now, Liz?
Yeah, just increasing our tourism options. So
Mm.
we just started offering camping in RVs
Really?
up at the farm. We're the only place where you can camp where the buffalo roam in West Virginia,
Wow.
which is kind of cool because you can get your morning coffee and sit there and watch the bison, you know, roaming the grasses, which is really, really cool.
How cool is it?
And then different farm to table events. So we're really trying to do more of those. We kind of had to pull back a little bit last year just because of COVID, but we're doing an event here at the end of the month on August 28th, just a kind of a smaller event. And then we're doing our annual Bison Roast again this year, October 9th. So we pick out an animal and put it on a giant spit and roast it, slow roast it in front of a crowd for 20 plus hours. And we have a live band and kegs, and it's fun. And we have a local chef do a whole, menu and things like that. So that's been a ton of fun because it's been a ton of fun to get people up here, one, to see the bison, two, to have the bison, and to try the bison when it's been cooked by somebody professionally, which is really cool because then you really get the true sense of what it's supposed to taste like. Yeah. And then three, just that sense of community and being able to bring in some other farmers too, because obviously for those dinner events, we do other things besides just the bison meat. We do all kinds of different foods and vegetables and different things from around the area that we like to incorporate. And then, local breweries, local bands. It's just a really fun community thing to just set up and offer.
That's awesome. So. And you talk about the agritourism, you talk to the farm to table movements. And here in West Virginia, I feel like there's a real groundswell of that happening. My wife and I get a farm share for a local farm here in Morgantown. And it's just wonderful knowing where your food comes from, right? Yeah. We get that bag every week, every Wednesday, Mountain Harvest Farm is the name of it in Morgantown. It's like literally a mile from our home, and knowing that ground is, you can see the farmers out there working it, and knowing where your food comes from. And I could just imagine the same thing with Riffle Farms, where your bison are out there and you guys take care. You can just tell that there's a passion for what you're doing. You've done research on it. I think that's awesome. Where would you say is the geographic region that you serve? Because you're not shipping. Are primarily local people then? Is that the kind of your market?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely more of a local market. We do Morgantown. We do also work with a wholesaler who brings our meat to different markets throughout the state of West Virginia. So there's a couple, co-op type groceries that are really committed to their farmers and farm fresh foods around the state where our product is in. It kind of just depends though, throughout the year who has it and things like that. But it's all the way from Morgantown all the way down to Lewisburg. So you could find our bison meat. And then we also, because I actually do a lot of traveling back and forth between here and Virginia Beach, because that's where Jimmy's stationed. So I drop meat all the way out there and all the way back. So we have restaurants and stores in Middleburg, Virginia, in Stanton, Virginia, and then we do a farmer's market in Virginia Beach as well. So we're kind of all over the place. But it's a really cool thing because it's a really niche market and a lot of people haven't had bison. And so it's been a lot of fun to introduce it to an area and then talk to folks about, oh, well, how do you want to cook this? How are you cooking this tonight? We're still playing around with bison meat as well. We've been doing this for a few years, but I'm definitely not a grilling or smoking connoisseur. So I love to talk to folks about their different recipes and ways to do things. So it's been kind of fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Do you have employees there on the farm, or is it, talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So we're pretty much family run. The only employee I do have is my brother-in-law, Jeremy. He is at the farm 24/7 doing all farm stuff. So he's a diesel mechanic by trade. So he's Mr. Tractor. So,
Yeah, that's good
and
to
he
have.
gets all that stuff organized and running, and, you know, hauls big loads of hay. And if we do have to haul bison, things like that. So he's up here all the time, making sure those animals are okay, and that they're fed, and that they stay inside the fences.
Yeah.
But besides that, it's just me and him primarily, and then Jimmy when Jimmy gets some time. So we're basically the three of us are really running the markets and the farm all together. So
sounds like you guys are busy for sure.
It is busy.
Have you ever had a buffalo or a bison get out of the fence?
Yes, we have.
What's that like?
Yeah. So it's another nice thing. It was a blessing in disguise that we purchased this property that's up on top of a mountain, because it would take them quite some time before they would get into somebody's front yard or in the road. So that's good for one. But what usually happens is they just pop out of the fence and they just wanted the green grass on the other side. Because it's been a little bit of a learning curve. So sometimes if you miss those cues where the animals are like, hey, I want to go somewhere else. And to be honest with you, fencing is only a deterrent for bison. It's not going to keep them in.
Yeah.
So you have to keep them happy inside the fence. That's the best way. So if they're not happy, that's when they start messing with things, and getting out of the fence is one of those things.
Yeah.
So typically they will just, eat that grass. They'll, take a wire down. Occasionally they'll go through a gate that's actually, we've had a couple of bison go right through the gates because they know that they open, and so they'll push, and then it'll give a little bit, and then they'll just kind of go through it. But like I said, they're grass fed and finished, but they do know what grain is, because if I have to move them from pasture to pasture or entice them into a different location, we do use grain. And so if you go out there with a bucket of grain and shake that bucket of grain, they'll come right to you.
That's good.
Fast. So you better be fast too, because yeah.
No doubt. What does a full grown bison weigh?
Yeah. So the females are about 1,000 to 1,200 pounds, full grown. And then my males are about 2,000. And they can get up to 2,400 pounds, but I haven't had a bull that quite that big. But my big breeder bull right now is right about 2,000 pounds.
Wow, that's huge.
He's a big boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned you started with 8 bison, and now you have a herd of 38. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. What's the goal there? How much population can 64 acres, hold with the capacity?
Right. So we're at about our max for our property. So to be all grass fed and all grass finished. So we would need to expand to another piece of property, which we already have plans to, and we already own a piece of property in Brewston Mills. So it's about 40 minutes north of us that we can fence in if we need to. So the goal is to have about 75 animals. That allows me to harvest about 20 animals a year. And we're on par to almost do that this year. So I've had to supplement a couple of those. Actually, we'll do about 15 this year. So what it looks like, I'd like to be able to harvest at, 20 a year. And to be able to do that, I need roughly a 75 head herd.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It sounds like you've got the business model down. What, Liz, you guys have been doing this since 2017. You started several years before that with your research. What would you say has been your best business moment since you've been in business?
Yeah. Opening up the farm to the public has been huge. Getting people up here and letting them see the bison. And then what we usually do is we do a tour, and then I do a cooking demonstration. So, because a lot of people aren't going to buy bison if they don't know how to cook it. They're afraid to overcook it. Or they're not going to buy anything different than just ground bison, right? Ground bison is super easy. You make burgers, so you can put it in anything. You would normally have ground beef or ground turkey. But a steak, you don't want to mess a steak up, right? And you're not going to pay good money for a steak that you think you're going to mess up. So getting people up here and doing cooking demonstrations was clutch. That was clutch.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
And you could tell that you like to share this passion with people. So that's super cool. And you can definitely hear that coming through. On the flip side of that, what's been your worst business moment? Take us to that place and share that story.
Yeah. Oh, worst business moment. I mean, there's like 25 of them. So to pick the worst, maybe, that they just keep happening. So it is what it is. Failure is our greatest teacher, to be honest with you. And I've had a hard time with that. And I've had a hard time wrapping my head around that. But I always look to the lesson that, either Mother Nature or the business is trying to teach me. So probably the biggest mistake or lesson I've learned is growing too fast or too big too fast. So it was like our second year of business, I purchased a herd from Southern West Virginia because an older couple was getting out of the business. And so we were like, yeah, we'll take them from you, not a problem. But it over doubled my herd size. And I wasn't ready for that. We didn't know how to handle that many animals. We didn't know how to rotate and save pastures and grasses appropriately for that many animals. And I kind of made our farm a dust bowl that year. We also, unfortunately, like it was like the trifecta. We also didn't have enough water. We were in a drought situation as well. So I had too many animals on top of that. And I lost a lot of them because I found out that there are actually two things that will kill bison. They're extremely resilient, but if you stress them out or if they get parasites, which they aren't used to coming from dry Western conditions traditionally, and we're a little bit of a wet area. So parasites will kill them. And we learned that the hard way. I lost a significant number of my herd due to that. And the lessons keep going from there. But that was probably one of the biggest that I had to kind of really pull the reins back from. And it was horrific. And it was one of those things where I was just inches away from pulling the plug and being like, no, we have no business doing this. This is not okay. I was actually, when a lot of it started, I was 25 weeks pregnant with my little one. And I'm trying to deal with calves that weren't making it and pulling calves up out of the pasture. I mean, 150-pound calves and animals that weren't doing well. And I was a complete mess. And it was a huge learning curve and something I hope to prevent anybody from doing.
It sounds like you have had a little bit of that imposter syndrome, like, why am I trying to be a farmer? I am not meant for this. But it sounds like you were resilient. You learned a couple of lessons and you've got to figure it out. And that I think that's a large takeaway for anybody who is thinking about an entrepreneurial venture, right? A business venture. It's not easy. Yeah. It sounds amazing at times, but it's tough. You got to learn, right? You got to learn from your mistakes. I love the way John Maxwell, the famed leadership guru, says it. He says, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. Right?
Yeah.
You don't lose, you just learn, right? And pick yourself back up and being resilient, I think is pretty awesome just to hear you say that. I'm sorry to hear you had to go through that and lost some animals and whatnot, but my goodness, here you are today and you figured it out, pushed through it.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
It was a great lesson. Honestly, I learned a lot from that. So, but yeah, it's one of those things you just have to look at those failures as teaching moments. Yep. And I feel like that's the biggest thing in business in general, because there's going to be a lot of them and a lot of them are going to really slap you in the face.
Yeah.
But being able to kind of overcome them and using them.
Liz, I can't help but ask, but you're a U.S. Navy Corps, Nurse Corp veteran. All right. So did your military background help prepare some of that for you? In other words, dealing with hardship and being able to overcome that?
Yeah, I would think so. Yes. I joined the military when I was 18 and didn't really have a say in my own life until I was about 26, I think it was. So, yeah, talk about, just going with the flow and grinding it out. I had a healthy dose of that from a young age, which is probably good, but it definitely helped make me a resilient adult.
Well,
I would say.
you're fitting in perfectly here in West Virginia because we like to think that we're resilient people
Yes.
too. So that's great, and I'm glad you're here. I want to take a second, Liz, just to mention our sponsors for the podcast, Positively West Virginia. They include the State Journal, wvnews.com, and Interaction Media. The support we receive from these West Virginia companies allow us to highlight the incredible things, the really truly amazing things happening throughout the great state of West Virginia. Our guest today is Liz Riffle. She's the owner of Riffle Farms American Bison, located in Terra Alta, West Virginia, the first bison farm in West Virginia. Liz, I want to get back into it. You talked a little bit about, or in your intro, we mentioned the Honest Carnivore, a West Virginia meat collective. Talk a little bit about that. I'm curious to what that is. If you wouldn't mind, just take us down that path for a few minutes.
Yeah, sure thing. So another reason why we got into bison is because when I was doing some research and reading a few books about meat and where meat comes from, I learned about factory farming and what happens to those cows in the slaughter facility and the slaughter process and the stress. And I was appalled. I was utterly appalled. I mean, like I said, I had horses growing up, I had dogs, I was an animal lover first and foremost, and I couldn't believe that we were eating all of this meat that, from these animals who may not go outside / may never ever see a green blade of grass. They don't know how to take cover, just all kinds of things. And I was really considering becoming a vegetarian. I was like, but I'm a carnivore through and through. I really am a carnivore. I love meat. And I really felt like, you know what? I think I need to get into this business and be the change that I want to see in that business.
Ooh, yeah.
And another reason we chose bison is because they're considered an exotic animal and they're a non-amenable species according to the USDA, which means that they really don't care about them. There's not enough of them in the nation to really worry about it or heavily regulate it. So they really just aren't worried about it, which means that I don't have to have a bunch of certifications to be able to sell my bison meat commercially over state lines and things like that. I do have to have a certification of some sort, but it's not highly regulated. So, which means that you can field harvest the animals, which means that the animal never has to go to a slaughter facility. And there are some wonderful ranches out west that do this and already do this very, very well and have been mentors to me throughout the years. And I've talked to and read their books and talked to them about their business models and things like that. And I wanted to emulate that. I wanted to be able to have a healthy meat source that could be field harvested and the animal never had to see the slaughter facility. And so that's where the Honest Carnivore comes in, because not only are we doing that with our meat, but there's a way to do it with everybody's meat. So there are some loopholes that are there in the USDA guidelines, because the USDA is made for the big factory farmers, the farmers who are doing hundreds of thousands of animals. And if you're not that factory and you're the small farmer, which we are here in West Virginia, there are loopholes for you to be able to also field harvest your animal. And we started it by offering the farmers the option to have their animals used in a butchery class. Because a lot of folks now are very interested in where their meat comes from, and then very interested in where their tenderloin comes from, specifically off of that cow, or the shank off of the pig, and things like that. So we do a class together and have it professionally done by a butcher. They come in and show us how to cut that meat off of a half a carcass, and you also get to take your meat home. You also get to talk to the farmer. So it's kind of that transparency, that true food transparency, that we're trying to offer to the area.
I think that's super cool and very important in an age when we live here in America, where we don't know where our food is coming from most of the time. We don't know what's in it. And right. I think that's just awesome. I mean, like I mentioned to you, my wife and I, with our produce coming from a local farm, I definitely want to check out Riffle Farms American Bison and try to get hooked up with that. That sounds amazing. And I love what you're doing there. What's the vision that you have for Riffle Farms long term?
Yeah, so we'd love to do more farm to table dinners, which means that I need a nice venue space at some point to continue to do those. And So we're thinking about a venue space, maybe weddings in the future. And then instead of just camping, I'd love to have cabins. So I think that'd be fun. And it would just make it a little more of a 3-season, maybe even a 4-season thing for people to be able to come out and hang out where the buffalo roam.
That's
so
cool.
I want it to be a destination is basically what it is.
Yeah.
You know, I want you to come to West Virginia for the weekend to hang out with the buffalo.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I really do. How many camping spots do you have there?
We've got 4 camping spots and 2 RV spots right now.
How cool is that? I love it.
Mm-hmm.
What's the secret to attracting new customers?
Yeah, that's always a fun. You just got to get out there. I mean, social media is a thing, and that's a bear, and I'm still trying to figure that out. I think the consistency piece of social media is the ticket there. So consistently, either with Facebook and or Instagram or whatever our platform you're on, just try and keep some type of consistent piece to that. And then the same thing with the emails. And then the farmers markets, you know, we try to get out there at different places and talk to the locals who are coming through, because the farmers market's an experience. People are coming there to shop, but they're also coming to talk and to chat and just for the experience and bring their kids out. So I feel like that's been a great way to meet folks. And then usually if I can catch somebody at a farmer's market and be like, hey, you want to come up for the tour next weekend? They usually bring friends with them. And so that's kind of where it just spiders from there, which is good.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. What's one of the biggest challenges you face in your business?
Yeah, that we don't ship.
Yeah.
I would love to. You know, the other thing though too is I've just been back and forth about our business model and if that's smart for us, because it's expensive to ship a perishable item, especially nowadays, on dry ice or second day shipping. I mean, I tried to send stuff to my dad in Massachusetts. It was going to cost me almost $200 to send him 20 pounds of ground meat. Yeah. And that just is not sustainable for us. And I'm not that big of a bison producer to be able to make that worth my time. And there are people out west who do it. And I've got some friends who do it out west and they do a great job. And to be honest with you, if somebody wants bison meat shipped, I recommend they get it from them. Tourism piece very, very well. And I think that.
Liz, you broke up on me. I'm so sorry. I wanted to hear that answer. You said if somebody wants to have bison meat shipped, if you could just there, we'll edit this out. Don't worry about it. But I want to hear the answer to this.
Yeah, sure. So if people want bison meat shipped, there are other ranches out west that do a very good job with that. And they're some of my colleagues who I look up to. And to be honest with you, I'm not really looking to compete with them. That's not really, I feel like, my calling. They already do that. They already do that very, very well. And I feel like we want to stay regional and we really want to pick up on the agritourism piece of things and not necessarily compete nationally by trying to ship things around. I just don't think that that's our business model.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's smart. What's one piece of advice, Liz, that you would give to young people listening to this, thinking about starting a company or maybe a farm? What's one piece of advice you would give them?
If it's a farm specifically, I highly recommend going to visit other farms and talking to the farmers and asking the questions when you're there with them and can walk around with them. I love doing pasture walks, and I feel like that for me is something I do almost daily on our farm. And I feel like that's where I learned a lot from other farmers, doing those walks with them, looking at their animals and their space and asking questions. And that has been super helpful.
I love that. I like to talk about it as being in proximity with people that are actually doing the work that you want to do. Right. And so I think that's very wise. What's one thing you do every day that you think contributes to your success?
Probably those pasture walks, honestly. But there are some days that I'm not here, so I can't do that. So those days, that's really where I try to hit the ground running in regards to like the social media thing. It's really been a big thing for our business. So getting out on that. But I think the pasture walks is number one. If I could do those every day, when we get to be here and Jimmy retires and we're here full time, every single day. That's how I like to start my morning, honestly. take inventory of everything.
Yeah, I think that's great. There's a management style that one of my mentors used to talk about all the time. It was called management by walking around and, observing, right? And just, I think that's what you're describing in the pasture walk. I love that.
Yeah.
What's one book or even a podcast potentially that you would recommend for aspiring entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So Charlotte Smith is one of my favorite podcasts, specifically for farm businesses. It's oh goodness, now I'm drawing a blank on it, but it's Farming for Profit.
Yeah.
Charlotte Smith.
Yeah, we'll make sure.
And she has a book out as well. It's a short book, but it's really good. Yeah. And those have been really, really great. But the other book that I really love, and this is very specific to bison, but really helped me out to start things, was Broken Hearted Ranch by Dan O'Brien. And he is the owner of Wild Idea Bison out in the Dakotas and is one of the regenerative bison ranchers to emulate. He's like my hero.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. And we have a resources page on our positivelywv.com website where we have all the books that have ever been recommended since we've been doing this and since 2017. So we'll make sure we get that both of those up, Charlotte Smith's podcast and Broken Hearted Ranch. So we'll make sure we get those up there so folks can check those out as well. We've covered a lot in this interview. Liz, is there something or anything else that our listeners should know about you or your story?
Yeah, man, Jim, I think we
We've covered a lot of ground.
We did. Yeah.
It's awesome. In closing, and Liz, how can our listeners learn more about Riffle Farms, American Bison, and perhaps even get in contact with you?
Yes, definitely. So check out our website. It's a great starting place, which is www.rifflefarms.com. And we're on Instagram and we're also on Facebook. So it's just Riffle Farms Bison on both of those.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure that we have links to those in the show notes and all this, the contact information there for you guys, and encourage people, if you're in Preston County, in this area of the state, make sure you check out Riffle Farms American Bison. I think it's super cool that you guys are the first bison farm in West Virginia. And I love the philosophy you have in your whole team, your brother-in-law, your husband, your son. And how old is he?
19 months.
Damon. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, sounds like he's going to have a great place to grow up. I could tell you now. So that's super cool. Liz, it's been an honor to have you on our show today. Thank you again for your and your husband's military service. We're grateful for that. I think what you're doing is amazing, and I can't wait to sink my teeth into a bison steak here soon. And I just want to encourage you to keep up the great work. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks, Jim. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So it's fun. We've been having fun with it, and we just want folks to enjoy it as well. Absolutely. Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of Positively West Virginia. Positively West Virginia is brought to you by the State Journal, WVNews.com, and Interaction Media, as we continue on our journey to help share positive stories of companies and people doing amazing things all across the Mountain State, just like my new friend, Liz Riffle, owner of Riffle Farms American Bison. Our hope is that we in some way equipped and inspired you with this business success story. If you or someone you know would be a great guest on the show, drop us a line on our website at positivelywv.com. And of course, we appreciate your comments, encouragement, reviews, and all that stuff on social media as well. And please continue to share these stories on your social media channels as well. And be sure to check out our weekly show, the Positively West Virginia Small Business Mastermind, every Friday from 11 a.m. to noon, where we bring a panel of business experts from around the state live each week to help small business leaders win. If you want to catch up on the video versions of our Positively West Virginia shows or our small business masterminds, you can visit our YouTube channel, where we have compiled highlights of each week's episodes, and a link to that channel will be on this episode's post as well. Positively West Virginia is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. You can learn more about our mission of advancing small business and entrepreneurship in West Virginia at positively.wv.com. On behalf of our entire Positively West Virginia team, as well as our Interaction Media team, including our producer today, Mr. Eric Tomlinson. Until next time, I'm your host, Jim Matuga. Stay positive, West Virginia. For more positive stories of people and businesses doing amazing things all across the Mountain State, be sure to subscribe to our channel. And also, we live stream every week on Facebook Live. Stay positive, West Virginia.